So the first thing we're going to talk about is the squad usage from Enzo Maresca, because I think that is somewhere that you can actually begin to talk about some blame with Maresca and where that lies. We can also then talk about how the squad sort of hasn't been built to help him. And I think it is a mixture of these things when it comes to how the squad is being used. Now, I spoke the other day about why rotation is necessary and why certain players can't play multiple games a week. We know Casado's been out suspended. Reece James can't play multiple games a week. We know Wes has struggled to play multiple games a week. There's the likes all down here. You got these yellow, like in the yellow box. These are players that are either out or, especially Palmer at the minute, he's being managed that can't play 2 games a week as well. He wasn't taken for the Champions League game. You then also have key players like Fernandes and Cucurella who are absolutely flat out. They look done. They look last legs, and it has really affected Chelsea. Then you have to look at who Maresca trusts in this squad, and I think that this is a massive factor for me of why this season is sort of having these really poor moments of inconsistency, especially now, is that what we developed over last season and something that you're meant to build upon was we had the likes of Madueke and Jackson in there as well, but also just generally the players that he's worked with over that year, that's the trust. He's now gained that trust by working with them and by going through the tough moments with them. You went through that tough period last season with these players. So now we talk about players like Gusto, who are so heavily trusted by Maresca because he's seen them work through these periods and he has been with this squad for so long. And I do think that, like I say, this is somewhat understandable, but then also not, because there's issues that come with it. Now, playing Gusto a lot is not an issue for me. I think Gusto is an important player for this squad. But the trust that has not been able to develop because you've shifted and you've had such a high player turnover again coming into this window with players that aren't ready built for the system, ready built for the squad, and Premier League proven. Instead, what you've brought in is players that Maresca doesn't trust yet. Again, Santos, brilliant player, and this is what annoys me, is that I would have brought him on yesterday. I think everybody wanted him to come on yesterday. But we don't know why Maresca doesn't trust him, but he clearly doesn't. He was poor against Leeds, he was brilliant against Burnley, there's been on and off moments. He needs to get more minutes, he needs to play himself into form and into, again, through this tough period. So I'd almost be more willing to have him just thrown in there. If he makes the mistake and we lose, again, this is not how managers think, which is why, for the fans, it's harder to understand. Because from Maresca's point of view, he trusts Gusto to do the job more than he trusts Santos, so that's why he's gone with Gusto. But again, the issue is that you're then running people like Fernandes and Cucurella into the ground because you don't trust Santos and you don't trust Hato yet. And these are the two main sort of usages of the squad that is baffling, that both, one, we don't know why Maresca doesn't trust them. Two, like I said, it's because they haven't been through that experience yet with him to gain that trust. But three, the squad sort of building, this is the issue that comes with it, because this is what he's been given to work with. And he does have to maximize it better than he is, because the rotations have hurt Chelsea lately, even though some of them, James, Fofana being the main ones, are very much justified and they do have to happen. So that has to be taken into account. Now, again, we talk about the likes of Garnacho. He's somebody that is gaining the trust a bit quicker, but he is Premier League proven. He is sort of good off ball, and he has it looks like he's fitting into the system and the ideas that Maresca wants from him quicker than others that have came in sort of in the summer. But again, we have to talk about this squad generally, how it's, again, mid-game. It is, Maresca is trying to, he's affording too much to trust, and I do think that he does deserve blame for that, because in the last few games, it has been poor. But one thing I wanted to touch on more in this video, because again, I think the squad usage from Maresca has been poor. I think it needs to be better. I think the squad building has been poor in the sense of getting such a churn. Again, I've said this before, I like a lot of these players. I like Gittins a lot. I really like Santos. Hato I'm a big fan of. And again, we've not even spoke about Esteval, but he's another one that I think, again, it's just gaining trust, even though he is quite clearly one of the most talented players we have. And again, I would have brought him on yesterday to play him on the right instead of Gittins, who was moved over to the right when Garnacho came on. That, in my opinion, is again another mistake from Maresca. But again, it feels like a trust thing, and keeping him out of the limelight after a really poor game against Leeds, and he didn't do much coming off the bench. Again, not for very long, but coming off the bench against Bournemouth. Maybe that's why he decided to keep him out for this one, and maybe we see him against Everton. Let's see what happens with that. But overall, there's something else that I want to talk about, and that's the tactical choices, because everybody seems to believe that what Chelsea need to break these teams is an overlapping fullback. That seems to be like, that is the number one thing that you go on social media and it's instantly what people are calling for. They think if we overlap a fullback, we instantly open teams up. Now, the idea of the overlapping fullback is to afford your winger to come inside. That's what it does. And it, of course, the two positives that come from it is you either get these players to come inside and get shots off, or you release these players to then put balls into the box. They're your options. That's what these things are trying to create. That's the conditions that they're trying to create. If I go... This was against Bournemouth, and I saw the same things against Bournemouth when we weren't able to break them down, that we need overlapping fullbacks. Maresca's system isn't built to not support the winger. That's what people believe. People believe that these players get into positions where they have to go 1v2, essentially, is what people want you to believe. But that isn't the case. And the examples that we've seen of profiling is Maresca trying to solve that, because the rotations, and this is again something that I think he got wrong against Leeds, is he got the configuration of these triangles is then important on each side, because the rotations that they make have to benefit each other and the profiles within them have to benefit each other. Against Leeds, they didn't do that. Against Bournemouth, these were more benefiting, but people don't like it because they instantly see Cucurella here and Gusto here. But the idea of those rotations is with Fernandes and Palmer, say, starting there, and then those rotations occurring, is you're dragging, these fullbacks are dragging players away in a man-to-man press. So you're now distorting, as you can see here, who can press and who can't. The Bournemouth wingers are pinned back here. These are the central players for Bournemouth. The Bournemouth wingers are pinned with these two. So you're instantly taking away part of their threat with that. You then also have profiles where you've got these three central players, James, Palmer and Enzo, who are better at manipulating the ball in terms of being able to find gaps, and they can find better gaps to progress it into here. Now, yes, people will say that means that these two are going to get on the ball in here and they can't cause the same troubles. But when you're trying to create these artificial transitions by dropping these players deep and then putting the ball into here and then trying to attack quickly with these five players there, for example, the idea is then to funnel the ball into the wide areas, and then these players, who are much more willing to make those runs to underlap, will give the wingers the conditions that an overlapping fullback would give them. If we go here, for example, Cucurella is going to make that run in behind. That's going to afford Garnacho to attack the space inside. We continue here. You've got the sort of yin and yang movements from these two, which is able to create a chance for Gusto to attack this massive space against Bournemouth, which they've opened up with the rotations between them. This is allowed to happen. This is supposed to happen between the winger and the number 8. Those sort of yin and yang moments where they can underlap, overlap, and support each other to open up spaces. Again, if we move it on, that was a poor one because, again, on this occasion, and this is why we talk about the profiles of, say, for example, Cucurella being there or Gusto being here versus Enzo being here, because Gusto is much more willing to make that run. But Enzo, he wants that ball to feet in the middle. He's a much more ball to feet player. He wants to get it in here and he wants to try and sort of create from the top of the box. Or he wants to crash the box and be the one sort of at the near post getting on it. So on this occasion, if he makes that run, he can open up that space a little bit for Neto. Now, Neto does end up getting a shot off on this occasion, but Enzo is still here. If he's made that run, there's a lot more space to maybe access Guiu or get a shot off more centrally. and drive into the box to make something happen rather than forcing the shot from here. So again, it's the movement and the dynamics between those two players. Again, we go to here, Kukurea, and we got 2v2. Perfect conditions here, 1v1. He can drive at his hips. He can sort of get either way. There's a lot going on. And this is a good condition for a winger. People would want you to believe that these conditions aren't good for wingers. But if the processing is quick enough and the support from the number 8 is quick enough, which often with Kukurea and Gusto, the support to the wingers is much better than when Fernandes or Palmer are there who prefer to stay in those central areas, which is then why the wingers then look like they don't have the support. Then, again, we see Kukurea makes this run, opens up the pitch, Garnacho comes inside, and he has a clear sight at goal, and this is probably one of the better chances that we had. Just goes wide of the post, I believe, on this occasion. So these conditions that are being afforded by using these two players is still, that's what Maresca wants to do. Now, the profiling, and again, people don't like that it's Gusto and Kukurea there. But like I say, that's the reason, is because they'll make those runs in behind like an overlapping fullback would. The only difference is instead of Neto being inside and Gusto being wide, which is still something we've actually seen, like Kukurea does sometimes come out here to allow Garnacho to come into here. Neto and Garnacho, as those two players, they're not good in these areas when they're on the inside of the pitch. They're worse. Like Neto, I feel like can combine on the inside of the pitch. Garnacho is much better starting wide and then sort of drifting into the box in this area here. But receiving in the pocket, that's not their strength. And then you're going to be releasing these players into the wide areas, Gusto and Kukurea, and they're going to either be met 1v1, where they then end up being funneled backwards and it actually stunts Chelsea's progression, or a ball comes into the box and, again, it's not one of our strengths at sort of attacking those crosses. So people act like we haven't seen overlapping fullbacks, especially with Gusto and Esteval when they play together. We actually have seen it quite a lot. Gusto and Esteval make quite a lot of those movements that we talk about here. Where is it here? With Gusto and Neto, where they can sort of create those 2v2 scenarios for each other and open different angles to access. So that for me is not the issue at all. It's the usage of the squad. It's the inconsistency of the sort of the core players and how often they can play, because that is an issue. A lot of our sort of core best players are injury prone, or again, they're sort of struggling this season. Enzo, Kukurea, Casado, the ones that aren't injury prone, but are struggling this season with sort of how often they're having to be used. And then again, like I say, where it comes onto Maresca a little bit is that usage of the squad. And I don't think it's been good enough. And I think he has to find different ways to sort of give other players rest, utilize it a bit better, and essentially just find those results. And again, those mid-game changes, I think a lot of them come from where he's a bit of a rookie in that sense. And I think he does need to do better with those mid-game changes. But I just wanted to explain sort of the usage of these wide triangles and why it's more about the balance of them rather than just the out and out, we need an overlapping fullback, because I just don't agree when people act like that's the way that we break low blocks and that's it. If the runs are efficient enough and we have the right profiles willing to do this, then it allows us to keep because again, people want you, let's say like this, let's put it how it is, how it usually would be. People want these players to then offer overlaps as well and leave this huge space sort of unattended, because they want this player to still be high in the pocket, this player to again be supported with an overlapping run. So this triangle ends up so high up the pitch that look how much space has to be sort of covered, and it's a lot. And I just don't think Maresca trusts the defenders or the pocket players work rate enough to protect these spaces, even against poor teams. So that's why I think it's more about having the conditions between the number 8 and the winger optimal, so you can still protect the space, still allow them to recycle the ball and sort of shuffle it to the other side of the pitch and control the game like that. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts, because yeah, the last few games have not been good enough at all. Like I said, there are plenty of issues that we can talk about, and we'll probably have another video out tomorrow sort of breaking down the last few games and what's gone wrong exactly. But I just wanted to touch on sort of the squad issue and the tactics non-issue, but also the tactical issue that we need sort of these combinations to start coming to fruit. So leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll see you guys in the next one.